You're standing at a crossroads. One path is familiar, comfortable, known. The other is uncertain, risky, full of variables you can't control. So you tell yourself you need more time, more research, more certainty, just a little longer to think it through. And in that moment, while you're weighing every possibility and protecting yourself from making the wrong move, something invisible is happening. The world around you isn't pausing with you. It's moving forward without you. And every second you spend waiting is a second you'll never get back. This isn't about recklessness or jumping into things blindly. This is about understanding a truth that most people never see until it's too late. Waiting feels like the responsible choice, but it's often the most dangerous decision you'll ever make. Think about how we're taught to approach big decisions from the time we're young. We're told to look before we leap, to measure twice and cut once, to gather all the facts before taking action. And on the surface, that advice sounds completely reasonable. It sounds wise. But here's what nobody tells you. That advice was designed for a world that moved slower, a world where opportunities stayed open longer, where markets didn't shift overnight, where technology didn't make entire industries obsolete in the span of a few years. We're living in a completely different reality now, but we're still using the same outdated decision-making framework, and it's costing us more than we realize. When you delay a decision, you're not actually staying neutral. You're making a choice. You're choosing the status quo. You're choosing to let external forces determine your outcome instead of taking control yourself. And the psychology behind this is fascinating because your brain is genuinely trying to protect you. It sees uncertainty as danger. It wants to keep you safe, keep you comfortable, keep you in the zone where everything is predictable. But safety and progress almost never exist in the same place. The very thing that feels like protection is actually a trap that keeps you locked in place while everyone around you moves forward. Let's talk about what actually happens when you wait. Imagine you're considering a career change. You see an opportunity that excites you, but it requires learning new skills, taking a pay cut initially, or moving to a different city. So you decide to wait. You tell yourself you'll do it next year when you have more savings, or when the market is more stable, or when you feel more ready. But here's the reality. Next year, there will be a different set of uncertainties, different reasons to wait, different fears that feel just as valid as the ones you have today. And while you're waiting, someone else is taking that opportunity. Someone who might not be more qualified than you, more prepared than you, or smarter than you. They're just willing to move while you're still thinking. The cost of waiting isn't always obvious because it doesn't show up on a balance sheet. You don't see a line item that says lost opportunity or missed momentum. But these invisible costs compound over time in ways that are devastating. Every month you delay investing is a month of potential compound growth you'll never recover. Every year you postpone starting that business is a year of learning, networking, and market positioning that your competitors are gaining while you stand still. Every conversation you put off having is a relationship that remains stagnant instead of evolving. Time is the one resource you cannot buy back, and waiting is the most expensive way to spend it. There's also a hidden psychological cost that most people don't recognize until much later. When you repeatedly choose to wait instead of act, you're training yourself to become a person who waits. You're building a pattern of hesitation that becomes your default response to uncertainty. And this pattern doesn't stay confined to one area of your life. It spreads. You start waiting to have difficult conversations, waiting to set boundaries, waiting to pursue relationships, waiting to take care of your health. Waiting becomes your identity. And before you know it, you're someone who watches life happen instead of someone who makes life happen. Now, let's be clear about something important. This isn't about making reckless decisions or acting on every impulse that crosses your mind. Smart decision-making absolutely requires thinking things through. But there's a massive difference between thoughtful evaluation and analysis paralysis. Thoughtful evaluation has a timeline. It has a framework. You gather the information that matters, you weigh the realistic outcomes, and you make a decision within a reasonable window. Analysis paralysis, on the other hand, is endless. There's always one more article to read, one more person to consult, one more scenario to consider. It's a loop that never closes because you're not actually trying to make the best decision. You're trying to avoid making any decision at all. Consider the financial implications of waiting when it comes to building wealth. Someone who starts investing consistently at age 25, even with modest amounts, will almost always end up with significantly more wealth than someone who waits until age 35 to start investing larger amounts. The difference isn't just the 5 extra years. It's the compound effect of those early years working in your favor. It's the habits you build. It's the market cycles you experience and learn from. It's the mistakes you make early when the stakes are lower. Every year of delay doesn't just cost you that year. It costs you every future year that would have benefited from starting sooner. The same principle applies to skill development. Waiting to learn something until you have more time or until you feel ready means you're missing the most valuable part of the learning curve. When you're new at something, every hour of practice yields massive improvements. You go from knowing nothing to knowing the basics relatively quickly. But if you wait years to start, you're older, you have more responsibilities, your brain is less plastic, and the same learning process becomes harder. The optimal time to start building any skill is always earlier than you think you're ready. Because readiness is something you develop through action, not something you acquire through waiting. One of the most dangerous lies we tell ourselves is that waiting reduces risk. We think that by delaying, we're gathering more information and therefore making a safer choice. But this completely ignores the risk of inaction itself. Every decision has risks on both sides. There's the risk of acting too soon, yes, but there's also the very real risk of acting too late or never acting at all. And in many situations, the risk of inaction is far greater than the risk of imperfect action. Markets move, opportunities close, relationships drift, health declines. The window for certain choices gets smaller every day, and no amount of waiting will make those risks disappear. Here's something that successful people understand that most others miss. They know that taking action generates information that waiting never will. When you actually move forward with something, you learn things you couldn't have learned from research or planning. You discover what works and what doesn't. You meet people you wouldn't have met otherwise. You encounter problems that force you to become more capable. Action creates feedback loops that accelerate your growth and understanding. Waiting creates nothing except the illusion of control. Think about the opportunities you've missed in your own life because you waited too long. Maybe it was a job you didn't apply for because you weren't completely qualified, only to watch someone less experienced get it and excel. Maybe it was an investment you researched thoroughly but never pulled the trigger on, then watched it multiply in value while you were still on the sidelines. Maybe it was a relationship you didn't pursue because the timing wasn't perfect, only to see that person move on with someone else. These aren't just abstract examples. They're the real costs of treating hesitation as wisdom instead of recognizing it for what it usually is, which is fear dressed up in reasonable-sounding excuses. The irony is that the things we're most afraid of when we're considering a decision usually aren't as catastrophic as we imagine, while the long-term consequences of chronic waiting are far worse than we realize in the moment. Losing some money on a bad investment is recoverable. Never investing at all means never building wealth. Having a business fail is a learning experience that makes your next attempt stronger. Never starting means never having a chance at the freedom and impact you're capable of creating. Getting rejected is uncomfortable for a moment. Never putting yourself out there means living with the permanent discomfort of wondering what could have been. There's also a social dimension to this that rarely gets discussed. When you consistently wait, while others around you take action, you start to fall behind not just in terms of results but in terms of relevance. The conversations change. The opportunities flow to the people who are in motion. The networks form around those who are actively engaged. And the longer you wait, the wider that gap becomes. Eventually, you're not just behind. You're in a completely different category, and catching up requires exponentially more effort than simply starting would have required in the first place. So what's the alternative? It starts with recognizing that perfect information doesn't exist and perfect timing is a myth. There will never be a moment when every variable is aligned in your favor and every risk is eliminated. If you're waiting for that moment, you're waiting forever. Instead, you need to become comfortable with making decisions based on incomplete information. You need to develop the ability to act when you're reasonably confident rather than completely certain. And you need to understand that the skill of making good decisions is built through making actual decisions, not through endless contemplation. This means setting decision deadlines for yourself. When you're evaluating something important, give yourself a realistic but finite amount of time to gather information and think it through. Maybe it's a week for smaller decisions, a month for bigger ones. But once that deadline arrives, you make the call and move forward. This prevents the trap of infinite delay where you keep pushing the decision into the future because there's always something else to consider. It forces you to work with the information you have and trust your judgment, which is exactly the muscle you need to develop. It also means getting better at distinguishing between decisions that are truly reversible and those that aren't. Many of the choices we agonize over are actually far more flexible than we think. You can change jobs again if the new one doesn't work out. You can sell an investment if it's not performing. You can adjust your strategy if your initial approach isn't working. Very few decisions are permanent, which means the cost of trying something and pivoting is usually much lower than the cost of never trying at all. When you recognize this, it becomes easier to take action because you're not treating every choice like it's final. Another critical shift is moving from asking whether you should do something to asking what you can learn by doing it. This reframes the decision from being about guaranteed success to being about guaranteed growth. Even if something doesn't work out the way you hoped, if you learned valuable lessons and gained experience, it wasn't a failure. It was an education. And that education makes you more capable for everything that comes next. People who wait are often paralyzed by the fear of failure, but people who move forward understand that the real failure is learning nothing because you never tried. The truth is that momentum is one of the most undervalued assets in any area of life. When you're in motion, everything becomes easier. Opportunities appear that weren't visible before. Connections happen naturally. Skills develop faster. Confidence builds. And this creates a positive cycle where action leads to results. Results lead to motivation. And motivation leads to more action. But momentum works in reverse too. When you're stuck in waiting mode, everything becomes harder. Time feels slower. Opportunities seem scarce. Doubt grows. And this creates a negative cycle where inaction leads to stagnation. Stagnation leads to fear. And fear leads to more inaction. Breaking out of that negative cycle requires a conscious choice to act even when you don't feel ready. It requires accepting discomfort as the price of progress. It requires being willing to look foolish, make mistakes, and deal with uncertainty. These aren't pleasant experiences, but they're necessary ones if you want to create anything meaningful in your life. And here's what most people don't realize until they finally take that leap. The discomfort of action is temporary and leads to growth. The discomfort of regret is permanent and leads nowhere. Look at the people you admire, the ones who have built something significant or achieved something remarkable. Almost universally, they're not people who waited for perfect conditions. They're people who moved forward despite imperfect conditions. They started businesses during recessions. They changed careers in their 40s. They learned new skills when everyone said they were too old. They took risks when the safe path was right there. What separates them isn't some special gift or advantage. It's the willingness to choose action over endless preparation. You have a choice right now. You can keep waiting for the right moment, the right circumstances, the right level of readiness. And you'll still be waiting next year, and the year after that, wondering why everyone else seems to be moving forward while you're stuck in the same place. Or you can recognize that waiting is itself a decision, and it's usually the wrong one. You can accept that discomfort and uncertainty are not signs that you should stop, but signs that you're on the edge of something that matters. You can decide that imperfect action today is worth more than perfect action someday. The life you want isn't going to arrive because you waited long enough. It's going to arrive because you built it, and building requires moving forward even when the path isn't completely clear. So stop treating hesitation like wisdom and momentum like recklessness. Start seeing delay for what it really is, which is the slow erosion of your potential. The best time to act was probably earlier than you think. The second best time is right now. If this perspective shifted something for you, hit that like button and drop a comment sharing one decision you've been delaying. And subscribe because we're breaking down the patterns that hold people back so you can build the future you actually want. Thanks for watching.